All right, welcome to Mewoosh Guitar School. We're talking about the musical alphabet. If you missed part one, click the link and check that video out first, because we are continuing on from where we left off in that video. So, when you're looking at the notes of the scale that I played, those notes, diatonic scale, and we call that in Western music a major scale. The key factor are the jumps that I'm making between one note to the next. I'll do it in a straight line. Tone, tone, then a semitone, then tone, 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 semitone. Those intervals are crucial. That's what makes this a major scale. If you mess up those intervals, you either get a different kind of scale, or you get something that doesn't really fit and isn't particularly musical, unless you're going for something really unique and unconventional. It's just going to wind up sounding weird. So when you look at these notes, these specific ones that I played, look at those on a piano. Here's the keys that correspond to those notes, specifically the white keys, just the white keys. In that particular diatonic scale, the white keys that you see are all the natural notes. The black keys, you don't play them in this particular scale because those are sharps or flats relative to the neighboring keys, the white ones, which are the ones being played here. So what letter goes with what note? It would make sense if you were looking at this and just making an educated guess that it starts on A, but it doesn't. It actually starts on C. So why is that? And the answer is, it's just the way it is. That's disappointing, isn't it? And I'm sorry to tell you, the reason is complicated, and it has to do with the fact that these historically significant genius composers were writing their music down before any conventions had been created for how to write down music. So a system had to be created that complemented what they did, or what most of them did anyway, so that you could translate the music that they wrote down into something that everybody could share and understand. This really was the only way of recording music, was to write down the way it would play out orchestrally and then give that on paper to another orchestra to perform it. The musical scales and notation was established so that a consistent shared system could be used by everybody to communicate musical information effectively and record it for posterity. So here's a musical staff. Conventionally divided into two halves. The top half is marked with a treble clef, and the bottom half is marked with a bass clef. Now there are other staffs, and they're marked with other clefs, but these specific ones are really useful, particularly for vocal music. But the way it's laid out here, middle C is right here, right in the middle, in between the two staffs on that line. And A was set as the lowest note in the bottommost space. And this was done before they decided, well, you can write on the bottom line too. Oh, okay. Actually, you can even add more lines underneath it, just like the way we added one line under, like in between the upper and lower halves. And that's where middle C appears. So we can actually add more notes underneath it. Well, by this point, we'd already said the bottom space is A. So that's why it started with A. As I recall, a German system that they came up with was started from A being actually on the top, and it counted down, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Worked its way down from the top line as opposed to up from the bottom line, which actually doesn't make a lot of sense. So that system did not last. It certainly didn't spread. The Western system, or the one that we're most accustomed to is the one that has stuck and is now the worldwide standard. So as a consequence of the marriage of the musical staff, the collective works of these historically significant composers, and I think the earliest pianos, which if you didn't know is actually a percussion instrument because a little hammer hits a pre-tuned string. So it is classified as percussion. The earliest ones only had the natural notes. They didn't have any of the black keys, basically. It was just the white ones. And that meant that if you were going to play at a major scale, you had to play in C. So the notes corresponding with these instruments that worked, like what would be the major scale on that instrument, that corresponds to what worked out to be C when A was chosen as the bottom space for the clef, or the staff rather, as we know it. So let's look at these notes again. And now let's make like a mask to cover the notes that we don't want to play, the ones we aren't using, so that we only see the ones that we actually want. And I've marked this with T for a tone. Wherever there's a tone rise from one note to the next note in the scale, the diatonic scale or major one that we're looking at, then we cover the note that's in between them with this mask. Wherever there's an S, that's a semitone. We're taking the very next note, so we're not covering it up. If you start this sequence on C in the pattern of notes, you get the C major scale. And notice we're covering all the sharps and flats. So we're not using any of the black keys on the piano. We're just using the white ones. So what happens if you shift this mask one space to the right? Then you get this scale. But what is it exactly? The answer to that question in the final video, part 3 of this series. Click this link and go check that one out. Thanks for tuning in and viewing. I really appreciate it. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe because there's a lot more of these videos to come. I appreciate you being here. We will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.